matter what, we come together for the good of our constituents, and I'm proud and honored to lead the People's House of the New York State Legislature.
The health and protection of the human beings that live in our districts is our responsibility.
Frederick Douglass's words for us today, I quote, "If there is no struggle, there is no progress."
If you want equity to happen, then this is where it happens.
All of us have a responsibility to the greater good.
The House will come to order.
Hello and welcome to Assembly Update. I'm Liz Koenig. Today we're going to be talking about several new pieces of legislation that our guest has introduced, and joining me now to discuss these pieces of legislation is our guest, Assemblyman Jeffrey Dinowitz, who represents the 81st Assembly District in the Bronx. Thank you very much for coming in today.
It's great to be here on this snowy day. We haven't had so much of that lately.
I know. So, and it wasn't too bad, though. I think
Not at all. People always panic.
I know, but that's,
I think
the Northeast.
It was a dud.
Yeah, I think so. But so it's been a busy few days here in Albany, coming back after the February break. And you've been very busy introducing a whole host of new bills. We're going to talk quite a bit about them today. One of those deals with training for judges. What can you tell me about that one?
Right. We had the fiscal hearings recently on public protection, on crime. And one thing that became clear is that some judges need more training dealing with the criminal, the changes, the reforms in the criminal justice laws, particularly around bail and related things. Many judges are very familiar with it, but we have a lot of judges in the state, high-level judges, local town judges, and not every one of them has all the training that they need. So this bill would mandate that every year they get additional training, a few hours of training done by the courts. It would go a long way towards clarifying some of the misconceptions, and it would basically make them better judges, we think. So we're hoping that we can get this legislation passed this session, since so many questions have been raised, many legitimate questions regarding the changes that were made in the laws over the past few years.
And do you think this will help with the criticism of the bail reform laws?
Well, I think many people who criticize it are going to criticize it no matter what. So my goal is not so much to worry about the criticism as to worry about if there are any legitimate concerns. We want to clear those up. We want to make sure the judges have all the tools they need and know exactly what they're doing. And so hopefully this bill will be helpful in that.
And when do you expect that one to come to the floor?
One never knows around here.
That's true. Especially with the budget process going on.
Right.
So
and,
we're kind of deep into that right now, so it's hard.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect it to come to the floor before the budget is completed. But, a very heavy percentage of the bills that we pass each year actually are passed during the last week of session. That's just the nature of things.
So let's move on to the next bill. It's a constitutional amendment which deals with the retirement age of judges.
Right. Right now, judges in New York State have a mandatory retirement age of 70. Now, some people may think that's old. Others may not think it's old. I guess it in part depends on how old you are. But the only exceptions that I'm aware of are for state Supreme Court justices. And Supreme Court is like the trial court. It's not the highest court. That's the Court of Appeals. So Supreme Court justices can be extended 3 times for 2-year terms. It's called certification. And that's totally within the discretion of the courts. But other judges have to retire at 70. And to me, that doesn't make sense. The rule that says that judges have to retire at 70 was instituted in the 19th century, over 100 years ago, maybe closer to 150 years ago. Now, a lot of things have changed since the 19th century, being that we're in the 21st century, including the fact that people live a lot longer. Back in those olden days, 70 was probably considered very old. Now, 70 is not really considered old by most sensible people. And many judges, probably most judges who are in office, are capable of serving those additional years. So we want to sort of catch up with the times, catch up with statistics in terms of how long people live and live in a healthy way and all that. but it would require, it can't simply be done by legislation because the 70-year-old mandatory retirement age is actually in the state constitution. So we would have to pass a constitutional amendment. And what that would entail is passing the bill for the constitutional amendment, it's actually a resolution, this year. Then we would have to do it again in 2025 in the next legislature. And then it would go before the voters at some point after that. And if the voters approve it, then it would become law. There actually was an effort not too many years ago to raise the mandatory retirement age for Court of Appeals, as I recall, to 80, and it failed. The voters turned it down. I think then Governor Cuomo was against it, and it didn't pass. But this is 76, and we chose 76 because that's the age that Supreme Court justices currently are allowed to serve if they get that certification. So it makes a lot of sense. And we need more judges.
Absolutely.
We need judges. We're short.
Now, the next bill I find pretty interesting because I have heard a lot of incidents of lithium batteries kind of exploding and causing fires in homes and injuring people. So what would your legislation do to help prevent that?
Well, it would not allow for what's called aftermarket batteries to be sold and used. These lithium batteries, which are, on like the e-scooters, for example, people have died as a result of them. And, many people bring these scooters into their apartments, for example, causing big fires. People have died. If people read the newspapers, they'll know that, and I'm sure some people do read the newspapers. This would hopefully prevent a lot of that. It doesn't ban the use of the lithium batteries, but just of these like used batteries, which don't really have the the certification that they're good the way a new one would. There are these companies that certify. If you look on many of your appliances, you'll see a tag attached to it, and it indicates that it's sort of got the good housekeeping seal of approval, so to speak, from a particular agency. I think there are a few different agencies that do that, and so a new battery would have that proof, but the used batteries don't. And so this is all about saving lives. It's not about saying you can't do your job. It's not about anything other than saving lives, and it doesn't prevent the use of those batteries. It's supposed to prevent the use of dangerous batteries.
Absolutely. Now, the next piece of legislation deals with increased penalties for shoplifting. What can you tell us about that? Right.
The bill deals specifically with petty larceny. So what's going on now, and we've seen this all over the city and all over the country actually, is there's just been a huge explosion of shoplifting, in stores like CVS and Rite Aid, but really all kinds of stores, in the bodegas on like on the corner. And what happens is, it's not considered like a major crime. Sometimes people shoplift out of need. If they're stealing diapers, then maybe they don't have money, but not that that's so excusable. But we're talking about people who are committing significant shoplifting, taking things that add up to a lot of money, and they go in and out. We've had complaints that nothing's being done about it because they're taken in and then they're let out immediately, or they're not even arrested at all. Whatever the thing is, if people commit a crime, I think that they should be arrested. And what this bill will do is, if you're convicted of that crime and then you do it again within a 2-year period, the penalty goes up. Hopefully that'll serve as a disincentive to doing that. And since that seems to be one of the most prevalent crimes that we're dealing with right now, I think it's important that we, look at this and try to do something about it. The police have their hands full with so many things going on. Even though the crime rate is actually going down, although some people don't seem to believe it, it's true. It is going down, but it's going down especially for the most serious crimes like murder and shootings. But for the other crimes, maybe it's not going down so much, and shoplifting has really become a major thorn, not only on our side, but really for the merchants. It's costing them huge amounts of money, and it's not right.
And then it raises the prices for everybody else.
Yeah,
So.
I mean, you go in some of these stores, and if you go into like the CVS or the Rite Aid, I think a lot of their merchandise is now locked up. I mean, if you want to get a tube of toothpaste, you have to get somebody to go there and unlock it. I mean, that's what's going on now. It's, you know, since the advent of COVID, a lot of these types of crimes has just exploded, and we got to rein that in. And I think this is one way, hopefully, that'll have an impact on that.
It sounds like a step in the right direction. Now, and you also have a piece of legislation. You know, the red light cameras were kind of a controversial issue when it first passed in the Assembly. So you have a piece of legislation would actually increase the number of red light cameras.
Right. Most people don't like red light cameras. I get that. There's a limit to the number of red light cameras New York City is allowed to have. I believe the number is only 150, but we have thousands and thousands and thousands of intersections. And this legislation would increase that number almost tenfold, I think, which means we'd have more red light cameras in New York City. Why do I want that? I don't want to see anybody get more tickets. What I do want to see people to be more careful when they drive, including me. We all should be more careful. And one way to do that is to have more of these cameras out there, because if somebody goes through a red light, they get a ticket. It's not a moving violation. It's the equivalent of a parking ticket. The fine is $50. But by having more of them, it'll be an inducement. And we know these cameras work for speeding. The locations where we have the speed cameras, there's been, generally speaking, a marked decrease in the number of people who are speeding. So if the red light cameras do the same thing, it could also save lives.
So let's move on and talk about where we are in the budget process. The revenue forecast is coming up. So basically that's just telling people how much money the state has, correct?
Right. We made our forecast, the state makes its forecast, the Senate makes its forecast, and then we work from there.
Okay. And then what's the next step after that?
The next step is we put out our one-house budget bill, and then we negotiate. We have to do all that by the end of the month, by the end of March.
So we have, what, 4 weeks left, or something like that?
Yeah,
and
pretty much.
So, yeah.
4.5 weeks.
So, and we're wrapping up the budget hearings, and I know that you had, you have the codes committee. So no budget hearing for that, because that's a committee in which pieces of legislation pass through before they come to the floor.
Well,
correct?
we had the public protection hearing
Right.
involved the codes committee.
Okay, excellent. All right, well, thank you so much for coming in and filling us in on all these pieces of legislation you've got coming up. I wish you great success with those. I know that whenever you put something on the floor, it's sure to pass, and you have a lot of interesting debate with your colleagues on the other side of the aisle.
I love debating, and the hard
know.
part is getting the bill onto the floor in the first place.
Right, exactly. So again, thank you so much for coming.
Okay.
It was really good to see you. We've been speaking with Assemblyman Jeffrey Denowitz from the 81st Assembly District in the Bronx about legislation he is introducing and will be passed in this current legislative session. Thank you so much for joining us today on Assembly Update. We'll see you next time.